begin. I'm Lainey.
And I'm Laura Beth.
And we are Steel Magnolias.
Two sisters who love family, traditions, and all things Southern.
We've got plenty of room at our table, so pull up a chair.
Hi, Laura Beth.
Hi, Lainey.
Well, still getting used to wearing a mask, I do have to say. I'm not enjoying it, and here's my reason. I'm not enjoying this. Well, many reasons, but you do it because it's what you do.
Yes, we've been mandated and asked to do it, so we're doing it.
So we're doing it. But I'm a big smiler.
Yes.
Smiley Bowman. Remember that character in a movie that we watched one time? Well, anyway, I smile a lot at strangers. And there was this veteran that I saw, and he had on his hat, and I always try to purposefully greet veterans when I see them.
Yes.
And they want to be, or they, wearing their hat of their war or whatever. So anyway, I'm beaming at this man, and he just turns, and then I was thinking, oh, he didn't even see that I was beaming because I have a mask on.
Well, a lot of people can see it in your eyes, but you're right. It's not as easily expressed.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, you would have cracked up at me this morning. I went to church in person for the first time in 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah. It was wonderful to be there. And we are in a new church building.
Right.
Our church relocated to a new building. And so I have been in the building to visit, but this was my first service. And so I wanted to do the whole thing, come in the front door, do it the right way.
I haven't done it yet. I'm excited too.
So put my mask on, started up the stairs.
Yeah, we have a lot of stairs.
Lainey, you would have thought I was hyperventilating into a paper bag because I was wearing one of those just surgical looking masks, not a cloth one. So it goes in and out a lot.
And you're in very good shape.
So
this is scary.
I got to the top of those steps, and I couldn't talk to anybody because it was like flapping almost because it was going in and out so much. So next time I will, because those stairs aren't occupied by people. There's not
You're going to have to take breaks.
No, I'm just going to wait and put my mask on at the top before I go in the doors.
Gotcha. I was going to say they need 6 feet apart chairs.
Yeah.
So we can take breaks on our way up the hill.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, that's a good point.
I'm going to get a cloth one instead of the surgical looking paper ones.
Well, now the ones that our state is giving for free are so thick and black. There's no way.
They probably didn't think we'd still be doing it in the hot days of summer.
I mean, that's not happening. It's like a black sock.
It is.
It looks like a black sock.
It does. A winter sock.
That is a January mask in the South, not a July mask in the South. Well, I got Frey on an airplane, and I do feel for her flying home to China. She's going to have a mask on for a long time.
And she'd do 10 hours from here to San Francisco.
She'll do, here to San Francisco, and then 10 hours to Tokyo, and then 2 or 3 hours to China, and then 14-day mandated quarantine.
Wow.
At whatever hotel they take her to.
You were an extremely kind host to let her occupy an entire floor of your home
for
the upstairs
4 months.
For 4 months.
Because she's stuck.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm excited about our guest today.
Me too. We teased this up a few months ago, saying that we had plans for an interview that we thought was going to happen, and it's happening.
Yes, this was all you. You found this.
So let me give a little backstory on how we got to where we're at today. So in May, I think it was, just a couple of months ago, I picked up a Nashville publication, and it was featuring a story about our guest today, Dr. Jerome Burt. And the article was discussing some more details around a TED Talk that he had given a few years ago. And I started reading the story, and I was like, oh, he sounds so interesting. And then it mentioned the title of his TED Talk, which was called How a Dinner Party Can Save Your Life. And I shut the magazine, and I went right to YouTube. And so I'm looking up the TED Talk, hoping that they've captured it. And sure enough, they had. And so I watched the TED Talk, and I enjoyed it so much. And if you're not familiar with TED Talks, they are 18 minutes, usually, I believe.
Ish.
And they are on one specific topic, and They are given in front of a live audience, and they've been around for years. And so
and they have in various cities these TED Talk events.
Yeah.
And it's experts in all different fields.
Yeah.
Just doing a short talk on a subject. And I love them. Even if it's a subject I don't even know that much about. Yeah. It's a great thing to listen to.
Yeah. So it's really quite a big deal to get invited to do a TED Talk. And so, I watched the TED Talk. I was like, this is just, I love this so much. I want to share this with our listeners. He's here in Nashville. Hallelujah. So let me see if he would be willing to come on the podcast. And so I looked him up, and let me tell you a little bit about him. This is psychologist Dr. Jerome Burt. He believes much of the upheaval we're dealing with in our country is because we're disconnected. So this is the overview from his TED Talk. Disconnected from ourselves and from one another. His prescription, getting together to break bread. In fact, he thinks if you do it right, a dinner party won't just save you from huge therapy bills. It can save your life.
I love that.
So welcome, Jerome. We are so excited to have you here. Before we really jump into some of the meat of our topic today, can you just tell us a little bit about where you're from, how long you've been here in Nashville, and then maybe what made you want to do that TED Talk?
Well, let's see. My parents met at Rust College in Holly Springs, Mississippi. My mom went home pregnant the spring semester, her junior year. And the story goes, the next day, my dad gets a knock on his dorm room door, and Billy, Big Billy, my mom's stepsister, said, put on some clothes, you're getting married. And apparently, apparently they drove 100 miles per hour down the road and down the middle of the road in an old Oldsmobile. They got to the house, and my Aunt Mary loaned them $8 to get married, and they went to the courthouse. They got married. They came back, and they fried fish, and all these sisters are standing with, arms folded on their bosoms, and my daddy was the only one that was eating, and he's eating this fried fish and just looking up at these women, and after he's recently married. So I guess that's the first dinner party that saved my life.
That's hilarious.
The fish fry that
and
saved
you
my
are
life.
A storyteller, I can tell already.
Wow.
Well, my parents eventually settled in Memphis, and I went to grade school in Memphis, and then I ended up being convinced by friends to go to Ole Miss. I was at Ole Miss for 20 years in the exercise business, teaching aerobics, and eventually transitioned to a psychology career. As we were talking earlier, I was shrinking without a license, and and I got to Nashville because I was doing a postdoc at Vanderbilt in psychology, and practice opportunity opened up for me, and it has been beautiful since then. I think 97.9% of my days have been wonderful, and I'm just really loving being a psychologist, and I incorporate, of course, a lot of wellness into my practice, but that's how I got here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then what made you want to do the TED Talk? So tell us about kind of your journey to getting to that stage and standing on some red carpet.
Y'all, every dude wants to do a TED Talk. That's all we sit around.
Well, maybe not every female, but I do.
Yeah, everybody wants to do a TED Talk. And so it happened that a friend nominated me without me knowing, just in case it didn't happen, and put my name in the hat. And the committee does a lot of checking around and talking to each other, and I got extended an offer, and they were like, what would you do? And they bit. Wow. And so that's how I got to do a TED Talk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was in 2017.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So, gosh, there's so many directions we could go. One thing that's fascinating to me when I listened to your TED Talk was I felt like I was in the middle of today's headlines.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
The things that you were discussing why this is so good.
You're going to make me cry. I almost burst into tears when you said that, today's headlines. You know, it really is.
It shows how relevant.
Right.
It's only getting more relevant.
Yes, that we need each other, and we need to love on each other and be patient with each other and listen to each other. And I just never thought that line would, be so relevant today. You're right. But I'm surprised that all welled up in me when you just said that. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to be sitting here with you. I wish we were breaking bread. That's going to have to happen in the future as well.
Well, in the talk, you mentioned pretty early on that there are scientific studies that really equate the dinner table and family dinner time to the level of development and character that is relevant and can be seen in children, right? Maybe I haven't read any of those studies, but I totally believe that they're out there, and I believe I've seen that. And what I do think is interesting, I think you alluded to this in your TED Talk, is there's really not true adult studies that have happened, maybe just observations that you've made that can point to having dinner with family or others being a strong proponent of development in adults. So can you talk about maybe even some of the things that you've observed in adults for some of those scenarios?
I just think, just as we are sitting here now and getting familiar with each other, and the more we talk and the more we lean in, the less our cortisol levels. Our cortisol levels decrease. Our vagal tone changes. Our parasympathetic nervous system gets activated because we are chilled out, because we're amongst friends. We're digging each other, and so we are social creatures. And when you have your people in place, and when you have certainty or some predictability about having people in place, your vagal tone, you're going to be more, your parasympathetic nervous system, you're going to act what rest and digest more and better. And so the data about the children, it's correlational, because it's not, it wasn't a controlled study, but whenever you have, you feel like you belong to a tribe, which we were designed to belong.
That's right.
Then you're going to feel better. Yeah.
That's interesting. One of my best friends and her husband adopted 2 children that had come out of some traumatic experiences. And I remember, this just came to mind as you were talking, that one of their family therapists had said early on, you got to start some traditions, like some things.
That's right.
So something as simple as every Friday night it's pizza movie night at home. But that gives them that predictability of what's coming.
That's right.
And one of these 2 in particular needs a lot more of that than the other, of just kind of knowing what to expect. And so that has to translate with adults, where we know we're going to taco night or whatever the thing is. That doesn't even really matter, I don't think, what the thing is, as long as it's that consistency of the what to expect.
Oh, and I'm glad you brought that up, because neuroplasticity, the peak of neuroplasticity before 7, and then again during adolescence, and you carve out these pathways that of behaviors that that are going to be your automatic behaviors. And so when you are up to age 7, eating dinner routinely and ritualistically with your family, you just know when you're doing it by yourself at 27 or 47 that something's missing.
Yeah.
Something, your body, at some level, there's something not right about that, because that is, there's something that doesn't feel right about that.
That's right.
And because you've that during your formative years, that's what's drilled into you, that's what goes on. You eat and share and tell stories and have theater, and break bread, at dinner.
Wow. I remember you saying that, and I loved even this verbiage, dinner was sacred in your home.
It was sacred, but it was not it wasn't, there was a lot of theater too. I mean, I would love when my dad would sneak to the table with no pants or underwear on, just a shirt. And then he'd get there. So my brother and I were like just snickering the whole time. And then he'd get up at the end of dinner and walk away. And my mom's like, Jerry, that's so tacky. That is so bad.
Did he do it really kind of just to get her going?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was sacred and fun. Right.
It needs to be both.
Yes. But like I said, it didn't measure up to the Nutty Professor dinner scene.
Yeah.
If y'all remember that
Yes,
dinner
I do.
scene. No, it wasn't that fun.
Not that theatrical. Yeah, that's a pretty wild.
That one
That
was
was
pretty good,
good.
wasn't it? Well, another thing you said, and I thought it was so special, was you said you always felt like the most important person in the room.
Oh, gosh. Yes. And my brother would probably say the same thing.
That's cool.
Because you get called baby when your mom's fixing food. Baby, you want some more of that?
Yeah.
So and my dad, loves the lecture, and he lectures to teach. It's not like he's just a good teacher, his voice. I channel him when I'm talking to my own patients.
Wow.
And so we get these lectures from our dad and this warmth and love from our mom and both of them, my dad more than just the laughter and of course delicious food. I don't think people understand, like, food is so medicinal, and it changes your biochemistry. Sugar, salt, and fat drops your cortisol levels for about 20 minutes. That's why, and so that's why we want comfort food when we're
sad
when we're sad. That's right. A kale salad won't do it. Banana pudding is necessary.
Is
if you're sad,
wild.
right? Because you're not thinking about what the food is actually doing on the inside. So here you are, you're getting high, but in a sedated way, and you're seeing these faces smiling at you and such. So that's all of this is going on when we're eating with friends.
Yeah. Wow, and I guess our body knows that even if our mind doesn't know that, because
That's
some of
right.
these words you're saying, I don't know,
Are
these
very
levels.
scientific.
But isn't that
But I guess
something-
my body
right.
does.
Yeah, your
and I
body
was,
does.
created to even know and
Right.
know how to respond to that, even if
Right.
my mind didn't connect
Right.
those dots.
Right. Well, if you think about a diabetic knows that everything that they ingest will affect their neurochemistry or their biochemistry. I mean, the same thing's happening to us. We just don't have to watch it like a diabetic does.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you want to feel crappy, ingest the wrong thing or too much of the wrong thing. But yeah, that's what's happening.
Wow.
Another thing, there's so many things I loved that you shared in that talk, but when you said we are born wanting food and belonging,
Yes.
I mean, does that not just make sense?
It does.
I don't have to be a brilliant scientist
Right.
to understand that
Right.
that concept, and those two things married together is what a dinner party is.
And if you don't get it, it's just like those two kids that you were talking about. If you don't feed a baby, of course the baby will die. Or if you don't feed it well enough, there's malnutrition. And if you don't touch it,
That's right.
it will die. Or if it's not touched enough, it will have some social deficits. And so we want to be touched. We want to be, we want attention. We want food. We want to belong. We want to have some sense of predictability about to whom we belong and such.
Yeah.
I do. I would love for you to share anything, though, that really led you to connect food and belonging to a dinner party. Because, once you said it, it was like, of course, it makes so much sense. A dinner party is a place where food is served and people feel as though they belong. So how did you get to, was it just an observation you made? Or?
Maybe it's just that, you make me feel like, is that brilliant? Was that a big
It is
deal?
brilliant.
Wow, I had no idea.
I'm
But-
sitting here thinking, have you, in any of your moves from one city to another, had to, sometimes you make realizations about things from having lack.
Right.
So
Right.
when you don't have a tribe,
Right.
then you go, ooh, a dinner party sure would be nice to make
Certainly
food
is the
and
one
belonging.
thing that I've always done. That's how I get people together. And but it, again, like I said, my parents, that was a big deal. I remember one time I was talking some awful trash, and when I was like 15, and my dad said, "Hey, well, let's go to dinner," and I thought, great. My brother, I say, "Hey, we're going to dinner," and he's like, "No, just you and me. We're just going." And so I got to, he let me drive his Cadillac, And so I'm driving his Cadillac, and he's like, where do you want to eat? And I was like, Victoria Station's the steakhouse. So I got to pick the place, I got to drive the Cadillac, and I got to hear this lecture about, like, you don't talk like this or that about people.
Wow.
And it was so bad, y'all. It's like, I'm not even going to talk about it, but he just didn't want me, and so it just made an impact. It's like the context,
Wow.
At the table,
Yes.
eating the steak, and my dad taking me seriously and
Yeah.
leaning in. And so I've never forgotten, like that conversation. And I guess the more sensory activation, the more memorable, the more theater, the more memorable.
Wow.
The more titillating.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, I'm wowed by this, thinking, gosh, that's a brilliant way to talk to somebody about a difficult thing, is to not shame them.
Right.
But let them kind of
Drive the Cadillac if you drive the Cadillac.
And then
You are so special.
Yeah.
And don't you ever talk like that again.
because you're too
That's
good
it.
to talk like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this all is now lining up for sure as to how you got to a place where you could so boldly say that a dinner party can save your life. Because,
Or a fish fry.
because I see now just the family dynamic that you grew up in, and that sacredness around the dinner table. So I'm curious as to some of your thoughts around conversation at the dinner table, specifically for those of us that, that wasn't a norm in life. Maybe it was sometimes, maybe it was never. And so going to a dinner party or hosting a dinner party can bring a little anxiety in terms of who's going to be there, what we're going to be talking about. Am I going to know anybody? Should I go alone? Should I, bring a friend? And one of the things that you mentioned in the TED Talk is to never show up empty-headed. And so I'd love for you to expound on that a bit, because I think it does take some practice, and I think it takes some thinking through in the car on the way before you get there. I think, it really does take some intentionality. So how would you expound on not showing up empty-headed?
That's just funny. I was just getting juice this morning over at the Urban Juicer down the street, and the juicer was telling me that she was having a dinner party tonight, and she's making some seafood soup, and she's Colombian, and but with blonde hair, and so she's making the seafood soup, and I was like, so what is going to be your conversation starter? And she's like, well, I usually start with the highs and lows. What have been your highs and lows? And I was like, well, she is thinking about it. And I had no idea that she would. I thought I was going to have to tell her, you should do this. You should have conversation starters. But she had already had, had that in mind.
Yeah.
And because they're going to be everybody's going to be a musician, or everybody is a musician, that she thought, we'll end up playing some songs or singing, and such.
Fun.
So, but she has some sense. I guess the musician crowd, they kind of know how their dinner parties go. We all need predictability and certainty. I think that that's what is nerve-wracking about going to a dinner party, is that you don't have a sense of predictability or sense of certainty as to how this thing's going to unfold. So I like to give people some sense of what they can expect to talk about. Just give them, 3 topics. I think, like, earlier this year I was asking people in January, if what would you tattoo on your forehead that's going to, be symbolic of how you would like this decade to unfold?
Oh, wow.
And so just stuff like that.
Just little stuff like that.
Some light top. Yeah, and that was an interesting one to pose in January, I'm sure.
It was. And notice I was like, picked January because we just have not done many dinner parties this year.
Yeah.
But as far as predictability and certainty is concerned, I mean, it's like I wanted you guys to sort of give me a sense of what we were talking about. It's just that simple. And but if people would do that, I think that it'll chill your guest out.
Yeah.
Now, some people don't like to have to talk about things. They get anticipatory anxiety, about what they're going to have to say, even if they know what they're going to have to say. So so that's a concern as well. Or just send a video, a TED Talk, hey, y'all, let's talk about Esther Perel's discussion on why people cheat. A bunch of adults watch that video before they get there, and it does make for a pretty riveting conversation.
That's cool. How do you typically, even if you are hosting yourself, get that out? Is that just a text?
I just text it.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat dinner with a couple of dudes tonight at the True Foods, and I'm going to, before the day's end, send them something, probably asking, like, what are you in denial of during this pain? Well, with regards to your career, or what is it that sometimes I'll get a little spiritual. What is it that God wants for you that you're not willing to accept yet? But really, what's important is that people don't realize that your statements, you can decide what kind of emotion that you want to elicit in people by the questions. How do you want them to feel when, that's more contemplative. Should you kiss on the first date? Though that's kind of funny. Yeah. Or when should you kiss? Which date? Yeah. And so the emotions that are elicited, based on the question that you ask, and you want people to feel. You don't want to get them the defense to go up. You don't want to get them feeling defensive. I think that's. I learned this back in '95. I was reading this parent training handbook, and they were saying, don't ask your kids when they get in the car, how's your day, da-da-da-da, every mom asks pounds with all these questions. Well, and the kid doesn't want to talk.
The wall goes up.
The wall goes up, and so instead it's just like, affirm their presence first, because it's like, I am so glad to see you. Yeah. It makes me so happy that you're smiling. Wow. And so that gets the oxytocin flowing, the bonding hormone, instead of cortisol. Like, I got to give the right answer.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Right. So that's what, when you are sending questions, think about, what you're trying to elicit. If you send any political question, you already know.
Your RSVPs might change.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow. I want to discuss when you're at a dinner party, or one of the things you mentioned was, I even liked this verbiage, showing well versus connecting well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's fairly self-explanatory. I mean, I don't think I have to go too depth. Showing well is what we do on social media. Right. Nobody's putting up a picture of their cake that fell or their new scar that they have or whatever. Right. It's usually the most beautiful day of the week that we're showing. Right. But that's not making anybody connect.
No. And some people we want to continue to show well because they cut up so well and they do such a great show, such a great stand-up. However, we get to watch and enjoy them do their stand-up, but they don't get to be known. Because they are showing well. Yeah. They aren't getting to be understood. And there's nothing, that's what I make my living doing, I guess, understanding people, feeling heard and understood. And that'll bring you a lot of peace as well.
We have a guy that goes to our church that is a psychologist, and he's actually, for Murray County, he's like their go-to person when they have some kind of a student tragedy where they bomb threat or something. And I thought it was so fascinating in a conversation that I had with him, because he said the number one thing he finds with those students when he meets with them is they don't feel heard.
Right.
Obviously, you're going, of course, that's what it is.
That's right.
But that's yet another thing that can save somebody's life at a dinner party.
That's
it's
right.
just feeling heard
and understood. Huge. Yes. And at a dinner party, not only self-deprecation, making it a no self-deprecation zone. I think a good thing to do is use the first rule of improv, which is yes and telling everybody another rule is like, we're going to keep our butts out of it. No one gets to use the B word the entire time tonight. Well, that's why I wear these bracelets. It's what I wear every day of my life. But
these bracelets say yes and.
Right, as I'm about to say but. But yes, right. And so at a dinner party, so that people can be heard and understood, you say yes, I hear you, and talk about whatever they said or restate what they say. And if you want to add something to it, instead of just
add your experience.
Exactly.
That might be different,
Exactly.
but not saying but,
Exactly.
which makes theirs go.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very good.
One of my favorite, I was doing this with this brother to brother. I had this mentoring group at a junior high school. I'm so dated. It's not called junior high anymore, is it?
But I hang with a lady who says junior high, so I'm laughing because I'm like, oh, I guess it's not. But I'm tracking, so go.
Middle school. And I got them to agree to not use the B word for 2 weeks. And these kids, I would take them lunch and we would have conversations. And so the principal called and wanted to know what B word they weren't able to say, because the kids were going around talking about, we can't say the B word. We can't say the B word. And they would not tell what the B word was. But I was
That's
like,
so cute. Yeah.
with one T, not two.
Yes. No explicits truly there. Well, another B word, being busy, comes up in your talk as well. Busy being the new status symbol. And oh, how real that is.
Yes.
So I wonder if we could just spend a minute talking about how do you even carve out time for gatherings? You mentioned, earlier that you're going to go to a dinner tonight. I mean,
Right.
How do you personally try and prioritize it?
That's just part of my life. They're so nourishing and fulfilling, and I am so fortunate to know and be surrounded by all really splendid people that I look forward to seeing. I do believe in the Presbyterian doctrine of the chief end of man is, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. So I don't do anything out of obligation. Everything is an opportunity. And so if I could eat dinner with, and with multiple people 3 or 4 times a week,
Wow. What would you say to someone that does have family that they're tending to, that just say schedules just don't line up for us to have dinner on the table at the same time?
I hear that, and I think that, well, you know what, if you are, because, now they say that homework is the new supper. A lot of families will say homework is the new supper. And if you're connecting with your kid while you're doing this homework, and, and there's that closeness there, I imagine something wonderful is happening neurochemically. That makes the kid want to do the homework, maybe. But there's love in the air, or can be, depends on.
It's
Right,
possible,
anyway, right, it's possible. But I just still think that you're missing out on this thing that happens. Well, if you don't, dinner is so important. I mean, it's throughout your life. For the rest of your life, you're going to have to know how to do this thing, sit at a table and eat with people. And I think I'd rather see people spend that time cultivating that ritual versus the homework ritual. You won't have to use the homework ritual for the rest of your life. It's sort of like if you don't send your kid to church or vacation Bible school, and they'll embarrass you and ask, what's that plus sign? On top of the building there. So even if your kid doesn't grow up, it's just a little dose, I just think it's for the rest of your life, you're going to have to know what a cross is, So I think for the rest of your life in our culture, in any culture, you're going to be asked to break bread with somebody.
So good.
Well, that's true. In fact, we have to eat. That's a given that we have to eat. And I would say to someone who's having a hard time scheduling, I don't know. I just think one meal a week where you're inviting somebody else in isn't that big of a difference.
Right.
Anyway.
But people drink the Kool-Aid. They drink the Kool-Aid and they believe that they're too busy.
Yeah.
I remember when I moved to Nashville, I bought into that. My dad was visiting, and I was saying this and that, and he's like, I thought you told me you wanted to be like Vernon Jordan. And I was like, I do. If y'all remember, that's the guy that introduced Monica Lewinsky to Clinton. But that's not why I wanted to be like Vernon Jordan. I wanted to be like him because he's this very mature, achieved African-American man that was in the Cleveland Clinton cabinet. But anyway, so And I was like, well, I do. And he's just like, well, do you think he goes around talking about how many errands he's got to run and how much traffic he's got? It was like my dad came to have dinner with me to connect with me, and this busyness and all my errands simply put a wall up. I'm not available for connection. You cannot deeply connect to someone that's telling you all that they've got to do. You actually say, all right, I hear you, and you move on. So you're missing out when you're telling people all these things you got to do. People, they hear you. All right,
in fact, they probably have the same things they need to do, but yet they're making connection a priority.
Or exactly. That's a very good point. And also, I just think too, that's the Kool-Aid. People think you're supposed to talk about that. It's a status symbol. You're just so busy versus these incredible people just taking care of whatever you got to take care of and move on. And I also think that we're not busy enough doing the things that are, if you're not busy cooking from scratch, that's the only busyness that you need to be talking about. You need to be busy cooking from scratch. That's the only thing that really counts.
Well, I so appreciate you just really tying a bow on what probably was swirling around in my head as a dinner party being an answer to so much that the world's needs.
Problems.
How therapeutic it is. How it is. One thing that we just don't realize, biochemistry drives the bus. Stuff goes on inside, activated by what's going on outside.
Okay.
Smiling faces, being interpersonal distance, people eye contact, that shifts your biochemistry.
Yeah.
And so all these things that are happening at a dinner party, it's really just changing the way you feel on the inside, literally. And I don't think we don't have to be aware of that, but that's what's happening.
Your
that's
body's
why it's
aware.
So therapeutic, right? The body keeps the score.
Great book, by the way.
Oh my gosh, Great. That's right.
Well, and I even think about how, while sitting with others, you are forcing yourself to go against the grain in listening to a story, in hearing someone's perspective, that you're not fast forwarding on your phone.
That's
You're
right.
not flipping, you're not scrolling through, I don't really want to hear their perspective.
That's right. That's
So it
right.
really is, it's almost an against the grain kind
That's
of
right.
move to
Right.
sit and listen to what this person's wanting to share at the moment.
And not add a but.
And not add a but.
And as we just said,
And don't be a but. Don't add a but and don't be a but.
That's right, with 2 T's. Ease leads to disease. Too much ease. The Bohemian movement, the cooking from scratch, the sharing palms, the playing the guitar. That's what's happened during this pandemic. Like, so many people have been cooking and sharing their food and slowed down everything, and they're actually saving themselves by doing that.
Yeah, I was just saying, I hope that in the midst of so many of the hard things we're going through in this pandemic, that families are having conversations about hard things.
Yes.
Because they're closed
Right.
in. Like maybe conversations that might be happening at the Sonic, just a bunch of teenagers.
Right.
That doesn't go into the depths
Right.
that maybe it would be if
Right.
they're at home
Right.
talking to their parents.
Yes.
Hopefully that's one of the good pieces.
Or, right, you need it all.
Yeah.
You need to talk to your teenage peers,
True.
to be able to approach your parents and have that conversation, because they're there to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Is wonderful as well.
Well, thank you so
Yes.
much
Y'all,
for taking time.
anytime.
I can tell that you're one of those that many people want to pull on because you just...
Well, pull on. I
I just feel so honored
look,
to have
when
you.
people start pulling on me, something ain't going right. I just don't, I don't want that to ever happen. And I think there's something seriously wrong with people when they don't want to be pulled on and included and such.
Well, we are so grateful to have you here and share you with our listeners.
Thank you for being so loving and kind.
You guys
and inviting
check
me.
out his TED Talk. And
Yeah, I'll link to that in our show notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any other ways that our listeners could connect with you? Is there, you have a website?
Just remember me when you're eating that bacon. Jerome probably would love me, too.
So good. Well, thank you. And we usually end our podcast by saying this to each other, and this includes you. Peace be with you.
And also with
and
y'all.
also with y'all. Oh, I love that.